and welcome to GameSack. We're back with more modern accessories for retro gaming.
That's exactly right, Joe. Geez, I haven't said that for a long time, have I?
That's true. I wish you'd say it more because I like being right. Anyway, we've got some cool stuff, and first up is something really nice for the PC Engine. This cool device is the Super SD System 3 from Terraonion, and I'm just going to call it the SD3 for the rest of this review. It sells for 240 euros, which is about 280 US dollars. This attaches to the back of any PC Engine based console like the Core Graphics or the Super Graphics. And yes, it will attach to a TurboGrafx 16. And that's all it does. The end. Just kidding. This is actually several things in one. Firstly, it has a video port so you can use a Sega Genesis Model 2 video cable, and yes, it supports RGB as well. It also has a micro SD card slot. And what can you put on this? Well, lots and lots of PC Engine and TurboGrafx games, of course. So yeah, it's basically like an EverDrive. You can run HuCard games from both regions on any console, no problem. And of course, it can run Super Graphics games, but only if you have it attached to an actual Super Graphics. Oh, and it's also an optical disc emulator, and that means you can run CD games off of the SD card as well. In fact, your console will think that it has a CD drive attached. This right here is awesome, and it's sorely needed as the mechanical CD drives begin to break down and become harder and harder to fix thanks to the lack of sourceable parts. It can run regular CD, Super CD, and yes, even arcade CD games. And they load super fast too. Check out how fast it goes from stage to stage in Gate of Thunder here.
Stage clear.
This even makes games like Cosmic Fantasy II actually playable. The original disc felt like it loaded every time you blinked, but playing it on the SD3 here, it's as smooth as butter. However, it can actually be too fast for a couple of games, like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. On the original disc, the laser could only read data so fast, and as a result, the video would pause every second or two. The developers knew this, and that's just how the game was designed to work.
I gather he was reassigned to cover the case from here because he had some familiarity with the murder in Egypt.
But on the SD3, there's none of that, so the video gets ahead of the audio and it gets out of sync before you know it.
I gather he was reassigned to cover a bit of an odd duck.
Thanks for your help, Henry.
Other games that use FMV, like It Came from the Desert and the Japanese game Gulliver Boy, are fine though. The menu is kind of weird the first few times you navigate it, as you need to press the Run button to enter folders. The Select button toggles between HuCard and CD games, so if you want to play a CD game, be sure to switch it over first. There are several different options you can choose from, but be sure to enable the arcade card and just leave it that way. Well, that is unless you run into a game that doesn't happen to work well with the arcade card for some reason. You can also select the version of the system card, which you'll have to provide your own images for. For example, you're going to want to press System Card 1.0 if you want to play the CD version of Altered Beast. It simply will not work correctly with any other version. You can also dump your own HuCards if you want, which is handy. Just check the box, turn the system off, insert your HuCard, power it up, and dump it. You can use popular apps like ImageBurn to rip your own CDs to the bin-in-queue format and store them in a named folder on the card. The SD3 also has virtually unlimited backup RAM, so you'll never have to worry about running out of space to save your game. Finally is the CD block volume. This lets you adjust how loud CD audio and the 80 PCM sound is. This is because some games will have distorted audio at 100%. Whatever digital to analog converter they're using doesn't really have enough dynamic range to handle really loud sounds. If you lower this to 60 or so, the distortion will be gone. Here's a good example of 100% volume versus 60% in Ys Book 1 and 2's opening narration.
Ys, the seemingly tranquil paradise, suddenly pulled from the height of its civilization to the empty abyss of infinite isolation. Ys, the seemingly tranquil paradise, suddenly pulled from the height of its civilization to the empty abyss of infinite isolation.
However, this also messes up the balance between the CD audio and the console's PSG sound, and the music might seem too quiet compared to the sound effects. As I said before, the SD3 offers an RGB video output. The video quality is mostly fantastic. However, I've noticed some slight video noise in dark solid blues and greens like here in the opening of Lords of Thunder, or the green in the background on the first stage of Bonk's Adventure. It's not horrible, but it's not perfect either. However, you'll never notice it on a CRT, but you might with an upscaler. Also, when I put the SD3 on my TurboGrafx-16, the noise is even worse. Still, it's hard to notice on a CRT, and some games like Gradius 2 here, it's hard to even notice on an HD TV through an upscaler. So your experience might be noisier or even less noisy than mine, depending on what system you hook it up to. I think it's likely that the SD3 isn't getting enough power from the console. A good solution might be to design the SD3 so that it provides power to the console like a normal interface unit does, not the other way around like it currently works. Still, the SD3 is a fantastic piece of hardware, and it goes a long way to keeping the TurboGrafx-16 and the PC Engine scene alive.
Okay, one down, and that thing is actually really cool, but man.
It's not cheap, but it is cool.
Yeah, I think maybe the diehard collector would find it interesting, and it's useful for sure.
I agree. And we've got another thing that's useful coming up right now, and you're going to talk about that?
I am.
Let's check it out.
Here's the Super NT from Analogue, which is a Super Nintendo clone. You can get it at Analogue's website, and it costs $189 US, and you can choose from one of 4 designs. We thought this gray one looked really cool, but most people seem to think the translucent one is the best. More power to them. It comes with a console, HDMI cable, USB cable, and a power adapter. You can use your own Super NES controllers, or you can buy a $40 wireless controller when you buy your system. First off, I've got to say that the Super NT is amazing. It outputs in 1080p, 720p, or 480p. It doesn't cut any corners, and what you get for the price is truly amazing. First of all, the console itself is small and sturdy. It doesn't feel like a lightweight piece of junk. It easily fits both Super Famicom-shaped cartridges and US Super Nintendo-shaped cartridges. The cartridge port is fantastic, and not as prone to glitches as the one on the NT Mini, which we covered a while back. You also have an SD card slot for updating firmware and other things. The only thing that it doesn't have is an analog output for a CRT television. This of course leads to the system's only incompatibility, and that's with the Super Scope, which of course needs a CRT. Designer Kevtris has commented that he'd like to make an HDMI to analog video adapter which would enable Super Scope compatibility. That'd have to be some really fast digital to analog conversion to retain accuracy, but honestly we'll probably never see that. As far as gameplay and compatibility go, we haven't noticed any issues that haven't already been fixed. The games run perfectly. There's no lag that we can detect, and the experience is very smooth. You can enable more sprites on screen, but we haven't found any reason for that. Too bad you can't reduce the slowdown in some games, but that's okay as it's just as authentic as playing on a real Super Nintendo. The video quality is of course fantastic once you dial the settings in, but even out of the box it looks great without adjusting anything. The audio is always a concern for us here at GameSec, and it's replicated very well here. Being that the Super NES uses a sample-based format, it's not a difficult system when it comes to reproducing the audio. Of course, the console can run any Super Nintendo card out there as long as it also runs on the original system. And all of your favorite peripherals besides the aforementioned Super Scope work great. Yes, that even includes the Super Game Boy. Oh, and flash cards like the SD2 SNES as well. This is the real deal. Sadly, there's no save state option here, nor is there any way to transfer a save file from a cartridge over to the SD card for safekeeping. That'd actually be a pretty neat feature, especially if it could be transferred back to the cartridge after a battery was replaced, for example. Oh well, the original consoles don't exactly offer these features either. As far as the system menu goes, getting around is pretty simple, but we had to change the font to make it easier to read. Of course, it's all up to you what you prefer. It also supports cheat code entry direct from the menu. There are plenty of options for your screen size, but if you want it to be a perfect 4x scale for your 1080p screen, first make sure advanced mode is checked. Then go under video, then width and height. Set the width to 1170 and height to 960. Then go back out and into scalars and make sure the disable V interpolation is checked, but not the H interpolation. This will give you a great 4x3 image in a 1080p window with no shimmering artifacts when games scroll. There's also hotkeys that'll call up the menu during a game when pressed. This defaults to down plus select. Here you can adjust the image and see the effects in real time. You can make it fill your entire screen if that tingles you in your sensitive spots, or shrink it down as far as the menu will let you. The scanline feature from the NT Mini is back, but it's been improved. As far as audio options go, there's a -3 decibel cut you can enable if certain games are too loud and distort. Also, be sure to enable cartridge audio and just leave it enabled all the time. Otherwise, you won't hear any sound from your Super Game Boy and some games on the SD2 SNES. You can also play with the LED colors if you're entertained by such trivial things. We prefer it solid red like the original system, but you can make it pulsate if you need it to be a bit more distracting. And don't forget to save once you've made all your adjustments. The worst thing about the Super NT is that if you ever update your firmware, all of your settings will have to be entered again. This is a pain, and I wish they could save the settings to the SD card to be restored during the update so we don't have to keep going back through everything each time we update the firmware. Still, if this of all things is the most horrible issue that affects it, then you've got to figure the console is pretty good. There is jailbroken firmware out there that will let you run Super Nintendo ROMs from the SD card, but only games that don't use special chips of any kind. And no, the system doesn't have cores written for other console like the NT Mini does. Still, this is simply the best Super Nintendo system you can buy, and it's way cheaper than getting a real console, modding it for clean RGB, and then getting a FrameMeister or whatnot. We've been using it a lot for the show as well as for episodes of Playing with Sax that we've been making, and it hasn't let us down yet. If you've been on the fence about this, rest assured you'll be satisfied. This is absolutely the best way to get into the Super Nintendo for the first time all over again.
Follow GameSack on Twitter at GameSack and at GameSackDave, on Instagram at GameSackOfficial, and check out our Patreon if you want. Awesome. I love the Super NT as well. I mean, like you said, we've been using it for a while and it's performed fantastically, if that's an actual word. So
Sure, it might as well be, because fantastically is a good word to use for that thing. It's just solid, it's well built, it's just really cool.
it really is.
Do they have something like this for the Genesis, maybe?
Kinda. Let's take a look. This is the Sega Genesis Flashback from AtGames, which currently sells for about $70 or more new and far less used. It comes with a scaled-down version of the Model 1 Genesis, 2 wireless controllers, an HDMI cable, and a power supply. It's also the first one of AtGames' Genesis consoles to have a built-in HDMI output, which will give you 720p directly to your HD TV. So, how is it? Well, how do you think? First, let's mention the included controllers. They run on a pair of AAA batteries. Batteries not included, by the way. As controllers go, they feel okay, and there's a menu button and a rewind button to help you if you screw up in your game. But the worst thing has got to be the bright blue light that shines in your eyeballs every time you press the D-pad or any button. Fortunately, you can use your own Genesis controllers if you like, but you give up the in-game menu options. Powering it up, you're greeted by a menu with a bunch of built-in games for the Genesis, Master System, and even the Game Gear. It has 85 total games built in, but many of these are brand new bonus games that absolutely nobody wants. We'll get to these in a minute. I really like how they couldn't source the proper box art for Sonic the Hedgehog and had to use the not-for-resale box. Classy. The menu is kinda clumsy, but you'll get used to it. The system also has a cartridge slot so you can play games that aren't built in. When you power it up, it downloads the ROM into system memory, so yes, it's emulation and crappy emulation. Anyway, after that, you just press the A button on the icon and you're playing your game. You can even fit Japanese Mega Drive games into the slot and they'll work, even games that are region protected like Thunder Force 4. Even Sunsoft Mega Drive games will fit. Yeah, that's right, it's absolutely playable in the very loosest sense of the term. But how about Virtua Racing, which uses the SVP chip? Does it work? Nope. How about the Game Genie? The menu sees it and launches it and lets you put in the codes, but when you try to start the game, it just resets the Game Genie. So no, it doesn't work. The EverDrive? Of course not, you just get a black screen. Master System games using a power-based converter? Nope. 32X games won't directly fit, but how about with an actual 32X? Well, it loads the game ROM, let's see what happens when I launch it. Oh, just a black screen. Of course. In order to start one of the built-in games, just highlight it and press the A button. And oh my god, prepare for your eyeballs to be destroyed! First of all, the games run at 40 frames per second at best. Yes, I counted, and they're not even consistent. That means frames are dropping seemingly at random all the time. The screen is also scaled poorly. Just look at the unevenness of the dithering here. That should be displayed as a perfect checkerboard. It also means that the scrolling has nasty shimmering artifacts in every direction. It's punishing to look at and even worse to play. Look at me trying to play Shadow Dancer, a game I normally excel at, but I'm dying a ton here. Here's how I normally do it on a real Genesis at this part. I thought it might be the wireless controllers causing lag, so I used a Genesis controller and nope, same thing. It's the frame rate and also the system itself is just so damn laggy. There's also a scanline feature, but of course it sucks. I mean, why wouldn't it? It's not even consistent scan lines. I mean, look at that. How did they screw that up? Oh, and of course, the sound is messed up and some things just don't sound correct at all. The music often can't even play at a consistent speed. Oh yeah, and the sound effects aren't even in sync with the game. Listen. So, just for fun, here's how Thunder Force 4 sounds on my real Sega Genesis. And here's how it sounds on the AtGames Flashback. There are save states and stuff like that you can use if you're so inclined. Master System games play in a smaller window and they've never looked or sounded so bad. They don't seem to run at the proper speed either, and the sound is very scratchy and dull. The Game Gear games play in a border that resembles an actual Game Gear somewhat, but again, they're choppy and the sound is rough. Back to the built-in games. These are a treat for any masochist. And of course, we've gotta try Mr. Balls. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here, and honestly, I don't really care. Or how about Bomber? This is the worst Bomberman clone that you're ever gonna play. Actually, just do yourself a favor and don't play it. How about Fight or Lose? Okay, I guess I'll fight. Oops, I lost. Jesus, that was the crappiest fighting game I ever played. This thing is super awful, and it's embarrassing that Sega keeps licensing their name and their games to AtGames. Hell, I even feel sorry for the poor HDMI cable for having to pass this garbage through it. Not only that, but AtGames is making Sega's official Mega Drive Mini. I tell you, someone at AtGames must be giving someone at Sega really good blowies for this to keep continuing like this. Sega, quit being dumb, fire AtGames, and step up your own damn game.
Well, yeah, Joe, I can see all those points. This thing is, yeah, it just feels flimsy, and I mean...
Yeah, it'd blow away in the wind.
Totally, dude. You gotta hold on to this if you're walking outside. And there's no volume slider. I mean, what the...
You do not want a volume slider on that thing, man. The sound is just awful, as you heard.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, we've got one more device, and it's a little bit of an oddity. I mean, it's not something you'd expect to see, but let's just get into it.
Here's the action replay for the Gamecube. And yes, the Gamecube qualifies as retro now, so damn, we're old. You may be wondering why we'd cover something like this. Yeah, it lets you select cheats for games and stuff. But I want to talk about the version of the Action Replay that comes with the SD Media Launcher memory card adapter. These are harder to come by, but it's what you want. This little device just plugs into slot 2 and lets you run Homebrew off of an SD card. If the Action Replay sees this as it boots, it automatically loads up a file browser showing the contents of the card. There's a lot of things you can do with this, but there's 2 specific apps I'd like to talk about today. The first one is called Swiss. This will let you boot games from several different sources, but we'll be looking at running retail games from the disk drive. Once Swiss is running, you can open up the lid and swap out the disk, and then tell it to reset the DVD drive. Your game is recognized, and you can make some interesting changes before you start it. You can force the video mode, which is the main selling point for us here at GameSack. Even games that don't support 480p can be forced to run that way. It's native 480p too, not deinterlaced garbage. It doesn't affect the frame rate or performance of the game either. Oh, and this works with the entire Gamecube library. No longer will you have to play a game in Cruddy interlaced mode. Of course, you'll need the Gamecube component cables or the Eon HDMI adapter to take advantage of this feature. You can also force 4x3 only games into 16:9 widescreen mode. You can apply this to only the 3D polygons or both the polygons as well as the 2D assets. Either way, you'll get mixed results. You might see more pop-up, especially near the sides of the screen, as these games just weren't developed to be drawn wider than they are. Also, not everything gets adjusted anamorphically, and sometimes things just don't quite fit on screen. Still, it's fun to mess around with, and it works better on some games than others. Tales of Symphonia does indeed give you a wider view most of the time, but the text becomes stretched. Personally, I'd rather play the games in the aspect ratio that they're designed for, but like I said, it's fun to mess around with.
Okay, that's right.
The second app I'd like to mention is the GBI, or the Game Boy interface. If you have a Game Boy player attached to your GameCube, this will make things a ton better. Nintendo is not and has never been a fan of sharp pixels, and as a result the Game Boy player offers up some pretty blurry visuals at best, as seen here with component cables at 480p. But load the GBI straight from the SD card and you won't need the disc at all. Plus it forces the Game Boy player to output a very clean and unfiltered 240p with no scaling applied. It looks fantastic. Well, unless you hate sharp pixels, then you probably won't like it much. But this also gets rid of all the frills of the GameCube disc like border frames and other stuff that you really don't need. It comes in a variety of flavors with varying levels of latency, but this one seems to work perfectly for us. If you want it slightly blurrier, then yes, you can use the Swiss app to force Nintendo's Game Boy player disc to boot into 240p. This will help tremendously, but it won't be as sharp as the Game Boy interface and it will have a touch more lag. If you're on a CRT, doing it either way offers a much better experience than you can get with the disc alone. I'm glad to see there's a lot of interest in the GameCube.
Yeah, it kind of feels weird to cover something like an Action Replay on GameSack.
Yeah, it really does, because it's, I don't know, it's like a memory card. But you know, it does its job, it works well, it's easy to use.
Yeah.
But I don't know, the only downfall is using the GameCube controller on Game Boy Advance games, but that's something completely different.
Plus you have to use the GameCube component cables or an Eon HDMI adapter if you want to get the 480p visuals.
Yeah.
But, you know, it is what it is. Some people hate that phrase. I might be one of them, and I just said it. But what devices would you like to see us cover in the future? Let us know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack. It's common knowledge that the AtGames Sega Genesis Flashback is an absolutely horrible device. But hold on, we found some uses for it, such as a doorstop. Or a tire chock. You don't want your car rolling away, do you? Or a hammer tester.
It works!
Is something just out of your reach?
There it is. Ah, come on, I want it. So close! Oh, come on!
Use it as a step stool.
Sega mouse? Ew! I didn't want this! Ugh.
Are you busy soldering but you have no place to rest your soldering iron? The AtGames Sega Genesis Flashback can help you. And as a beverage holder, I mean, who wants to drink out of a pesky bottle? So see, it is useful.